All right, good morning, y'all. It's Ben here at Bates Nursery, and today we are going to be talking about organic weed control. Initially, we were looking at doing a different topic on xeriscaping, and with that xeriscaping topic, we decided we had something that's probably a little more timely right now, specifically organic weed control. We have been starting to make a little bit of movement in our trial garden, and we've started laying some plastic down, and so we thought this would be a good time to address those methods. So again, organic weed control, we'll touch on synthetic weed control and maybe advantages and considerations, but with everything going on in the world right now, plastics in our environment, a lot of people have heard bad things about glyphosate and other synthetic herbicides. There are some good options out there for y'all. So we're going to do a little bit of slideshow to get started, just to kind of outline some of the things we're talking about. Again, it can get a little bit complicated when we're talking organic, natural, all these other things. So yeah, we'll jump into a slideshow, and we should have that available for y'all if y'all want to look at it afterwards. But yeah, we'll get going. We're going to get started. My first slide actually is a picture from my weedy gutter. So I just wanted to show y'all a big old collection of weeds right there. There's some things we can look at going on. But yeah, today we're talking about natural, non-synthetic, whether it be chemical applications or physical weed pulling or smothering. We're going to look at methods that you can use to keep synthetic herbicide out of your landscape. Let's talk about this picture real quick. That is an ugly gutter. We've got some rocks there suppressing the weeds and covering them, and we'll talk about that later. But because there's so much water coming out of this gutter, the weeds thrive there. So we'll talk about methods that may not use spraying the weeds to get rid of them. I will tell you that some of these are bulbs. Those have to be hand pulled. But some of the other weeds, whenever I divert that gutter, they'll dry up and they won't thrive there anymore. So yeah, that's a weedy gutter. There's probably multiple scenarios you could use. Again, rocks will suppress the weeds. We've got water. If we change that water, we'll change the environment. So yeah, just an introduction so you can see I've got weeds too. This was probably about 3 months ago. This really doesn't have any weeds right now. So let's get going. Okay, organic, natural, safe. There's a ton of terms out there right now. We kind of want to know where we're going, where the gist is, and the products you're getting. What does it mean? So natural and organic, really, for herbicides, don't have one official definition. It's kind of loose right now, and there are a couple of organizations that do certify these. And there's other ones for large-scale agriculture farming, but we're looking at is OMRI or OMRI. That's an independent certification for organic products. And then NOP, that is the federal government USDA. And that's what all of our bonide products are going to be certified by. So again, those are very relative. They use different criteria for certifying. I think both are really good metrics. You do see OMRI more for large-scale vegetable farming and things like that. Organic. So for today specifically, we're going to be talking about things that don't add any synthetic manufactured products to our environment. Now, we may be able to use things that we can put down and remove from the environment, but we're talking about things that don't stay in the ground, in our soil, and that persist because they just don't break down. So that's what we're going to talk about today with organic. The last thing I want to mention is about the word safe. We kind of get into some weird territory with the word safe because really we don't want anyone to think anything is 100% safe. Anything can be dangerous if you use it the wrong way. So even these organic chemicals that we have, they can perhaps irritate your skin, or, if you were to use way too much, it could persist in the soil and damage things. So when we're talking about safety with these products, organic products are safer for us, but we still need to be mindful of what we're doing. So, even if it's organic, wear some rubber boots, wear some rubber gloves, and doing it at the right time of day to where we're not moving these products where they don't need to be. So just a little blurb on the word safe. Just we all need to treat everything, no matter what it is, with a little bit of respect. So just be safe out there, y'all. And we'll talk about that later. We'll do a little time lapse and we'll talk about protective equipment. Okay, organic advantages, limitations. I'd love to say you guys can take over every weed in the world with organic herbicides. There are some limitations, but there are some advantages too. So knowing that line will help you make the right choice. So advantages. Organics, it's kind of self-explanatory. They are safer around our edible plants. So if you're going to be harvesting something that's growing in the ground and you're going to eat it, we don't want anything that plant is going to take up and eventually make its way to us. So safer for edibles. Less risk to the environment. These products tend to break down, be naturally occurring, so they should move out of our soil pretty quickly. Little to no risk for pets and kids. So a lot of us have families. We've got a lot of stuff going on in our yard. You should still wait for any of these liquid products to dry. But generally, if someone were to eat a blade of grass with an organic herbicide on it, it should not harm them. So little risk. Typically, you can re-enter once this product dries, and you can also harvest typically in the same day if you're spraying the area with organic herbicide. So harvest quicker, get out in your yard quicker. It can be cheaper. So a lot of these organic herbicides are like do-it-yourself recipes, whether it's a vinegar or a salt or a fatty acid. You can save some money if you're willing to do some kind of like home recipes. There's a lot of them out there. The agricultural herbicide products can actually be more expensive, so it just depends on where you're going. But you can save some money, and again, like I said, it's going to break down naturally, so we're not having to worry about persistent chemicals in our soil. So limitations. So what is just not going to work with organic control? So the biggest one is herbicides that are organic typically do not kill down to the root system, so you're going to need frequent application. So typically 1 to every 2 weeks for a lot of these herbicides in the growing season. So you're just going to have to reapply more, where some of these synthetics like glyphosate or dicamba are going to go down to the root system and kill that plant outright. Large plants, so if we're trying to kill trees, large perennials, weeds that are tall, this is something that we either need to cut these down to a manageable level, or we need to use something that we can kill that tree effectively without having to come back over and over and over again with a product. Typically, that is a synthetic herbicide applied to the site. Woody invasive removal. So a lot of us are having to do some invasive plant removal. Maybe you've got privet, or you've got some other invasive plants, ivies, vines. Those can be really difficult to control. Really, glyphosate and herbicide is the best way to control those. And there are safe ways to do that versus trying to treat constantly and put a lot of products and work out there. That synthetic may be quicker for an invasive removal job. And then difficult weeds. So some of these weeds don't respond at all, except for a very specific chemical. So nut sedge is one of those, and we have specific nut sedge products. Wild violets, clover, anything with this kind of waxy coating can be very difficult. There are some products you can add, but are not organic, that can help that. But, if you can treat those in very controlled locations, we can limit how much synthetics we're putting out there. So there's a little short list. I'm sure there's more things that we can think of and talk about, but just to kind of see where the line is, where's this organic stuff just not going to work? Okay, so kind of a big thing for me when we're talking about products is using any product in a way that's responsible for people in the environment. We just don't want to get in that pitfall where we think because it's organic and natural that it can't harm us. There's plenty of plants and chemicals out there that are natural that are very dangerous to us. So just even if it seems safe and organic, it's good to be careful, restrict our use, and only use these things when we need it, and to not, be putting too much of something in the environment, and think of your neighbors and think of your pets and the water runoff. So we're kind of talking about circle of responsibility. Just think of everything before we start spraying, if we need to do it and how much we need to do. Okay, so now we're going to get down to the bread and butter. Different methods of weed control. I've kind of tried to get it down as simple as I can into 4 of them. So number 1, and we're always trying to get away from this, is hand pulling. So mechanical removal, meaning using hands, tools, maybe even power tools, weed eaters and stuff like that. It's the most effective for organic gardening. In fact, this is the backbone of any organic gardening, is hand removal. It's the most physically demanding, but it's also not going to harm other plants. You can be very specific with what you're pulling. You can get out the whole root system, and you're not adding anything to the environment other than a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears. So mechanical removal, I've got a couple of tools out here that we can look at later. But, find a good tool and put it to work, and that's really going to be a good combination with another organic product. The second one that we want to talk about, and this is something that we're going to address in our trial garden, is environmental controls. So heat, cold, water, drought are a little less common, but we're talking about using the environment to our advantage to control these weeds. So right now we're talking about heat and solarizing these plants using plastic to raise that soil temperature. You can do the same thing in winter with the cold. So environmental control. Yeah, so there's a little photo of we just put this down a week or 2 ago, this plastic. So, and we'll kind of talk about why we're doing the different colors. But yeah, solarizing, it's literally putting a material down over that surface to raise the temperature and fry those plants. So, and there's a little bit of number 3 in there too. So this is competition and suppression. Probably the most overlooked for organic weed control. You can use mulch, you can use plastic, which is not really going to be organic in the long run, or you can use things like cardboard, which will break down, and we'll take a look at some of that. But you can use organic materials to literally smother, suppress those weeds. And then you can also do plants or plantings that are going to be more aggressive than those weeds. So you basically get to see your flowers over the weeds, and you're never seeing those weeds, and they'll outcompete them. Again, we'll talk about some of that and maybe some plant options if you're looking for that over competition method. And then the 4th one, so I put chemical controls at the very end here because really, ideally, that would be our last resort, is to spray chemicals. Again, we carry bonide chemicals. There's other chemicals out there. There's a ton of do-it-yourself ones out there. Vinegars and salts and fatty acids. Typically, they're going to be safer than synthetic, but they shouldn't be number 1. If you're relying on these chemical sprays, you're probably going to be disappointed by their effectiveness. But if you can combine it with hand pulling or environmental control, you can use these organic chemicals pretty effectively. Okay, number 1, mechanical weed removal. So yeah, that's a really nice, complicated way to say just pull those weeds. There's not much getting around it. This is just the best, most productive thing to do. The backbone of any gardening is to pull those weeds. Again, it's accurate. It doesn't harm a whole lot, and it can be combined with other things. So typically in my garden, around my plants, my desired plants, my shrubs, I'm hand pulling, maybe up to a foot from that trunk. And then I'm using some other method, whether it's a chemical or another plant or mulch, to control it from there on so that I can pull all those weeds right around that tree so I don't harm it. And that's kind of my method, and that's pretty common. And you'll find which weeds are easy to pull right now. A tool, some good gloves, and a cozy seat. Maybe a cold drink too. It's pretty hot. Bottle of water's fine. And that's number 1. I mean, hand pulling weeds, like I said, it's can be difficult. But if we can find a way to make it somewhat enjoyable, maybe have some music in the garden, you can find a little zen time and really make a lot of progress on those weeds. This can be a little more difficult in a lawn, but in a garden, ornamental garden or vegetable garden, hand pulling is the way to go. There's a picture there of a scuffle hoe down on the bottom right. And I know Tyler's talked about tools before. That's kind of one of my favorite, and I've got one here on the table. It's kind of one of my favorite for easy weed removal if you don't want to have to bend over. That's a really cool tool. It does have its limitations, but I find that an easy one for someone tall like me that doesn't want to always be bending over. Probably one of the ones I use the most. Okay, number 2. I got a cool picture here from the University of California of agricultural. Basically, they put something similar to saran wrap down on the soil to solarize, and if farms can use it, we can definitely use that at home. So environmental controls. So number 1 for us is solarizing, literally superheating the soil. This can kill weeds. It can kill insects. Sometimes if we get it too hot, you can kill microbes in the soil, so we do need to be careful. But yeah, solarizing. And again, we showed a picture, and we're going to see a time lapse at the end of the segment about solarizing, different methods and materials you can use. But yeah, so that's solarizing. We'll touch on that again. Plant structures. So greenhouses, a lot of people are familiar with cold frames. You can give your plants a bubble that they're going to prefer, or you can have a bubble that they're outside of. And you can use these simple houses to control that environment and promote the plants you want. And then lastly, this is a lot less common, but dry and wet zones. So, certain weeds, and we talked about nutsedge, this is one of those that likes water. Certain weeds thrive in certain environments. So whether it's a dry environment or a wet environment, if we can alter that environment, that our plants can do okay, but the weeds are really going to suffer, we can do that. You might be able to irrigate just your plants, and then the other parts of your bed go dry to where your weeds really struggle to take hold. Like I said, or flooding. If you have a water garden scenario, there's a lot of weeds that just are not going to tolerate that. So if we can have our gardens and landscape really have kind of a certain habitat, we can kind of dissuade weeds from growing there. There's a couple of extreme pictures at the bottom of dry soil and wet soil. Again, they both have their own things. The biggest one I've dealt with is nutsedge. It loves to be around irrigation, but if you let it dry out, nutsedge will tend to kind of fade away. So just one of those less used environmental controls. All right, number 3, competition and weed suppression. I think this is a big overlooked one. Competition is kind of the one I really try to dig into because I think it's underused. So we're talking about mainly with lawns and overseeding and getting that grass in there. And you can see that bottom picture is a dandelion growing in a lawn. If we can get our lawn super thick, those weeds are really going to struggle to grow big, and we can get rid of them easily. So that's what we're talking about with competition. The picture above that, the prairie garden, that's also an example of competition. You see a lot of flowers, a lot of grasses. I can't necessarily see the weeds that we had before in that garden. So if you can use a garden design that can be dense and thick, maybe using seed mixes or spreading perennials, I think I put down catmint or even ground covers. These can way outcompete our weeds. There may need to be some hand pulling here or there, but essentially these other plants that you desire are becoming our mulch, and they're suppressing those weeds. So just promote those plants you want, and they should smother out a lot of that weed cover. Cover crops, we just want to mention that we're getting into cool season vegetables. You can do cover crops over the winter for more vegetable production. And the cover crop adds nitrogen to the soil, but also kind of smothers out any winter weeds. So, we're just kind of getting our bare soil from season to season without weed growth. And then suppression. So the cardboard, and a lot of people have definitely tried this method, and it kind of gets mixed results depending on how you do it. But cardboard, this is a biodegradable, compostable material that you can literally smother weeds. We're talking about cutting out the sunlight, which is how all plants need to survive. So if we can smother them, we have a good chance of defeating those weeds, and then you don't have to remove that cardboard from the bed like the plastic. So cardboard, I like this picture because it's showing all the little pockets around the cardboard with the plants growing. It may not be pretty at first, but it can really kind of pile up year to year. So yeah, mulch, cardboard, rocks. My little picture of my gutter where the rocks are, there's no weeds, so that's kind of a benefit. So anything you can do to literally smother, cover those weeds, it's going to be great. Okay, chemical weed control, the last one, and like I said, the one that would be my last resort. I've got a couple here on the table. I've got a couple pictures of some that we don't have right now. But yeah, we're going to talk about bonide ones first. And most of these are sprayable. There's not many granular organic weed controls. But the one that we saw the most of is burnout. And I've got burnout up here with me. Burnout is, I believe, an acid base. Yeah, so it's caprylic acid and capric acid. And caprylic acid is something that we've been hearing a lot more about lately. There's another product Bonide's coming up with that we don't have yet called Cleanup. I believe that's going to have a similar acid. These are general purpose herbicides. So basically anything that they touch, they're going to start damaging and killing. So this is something we don't want to use in our lawn if you don't want to kill your grass. I would imagine burnout is going to be a once every week to 2 week kind of thing. And typically when we're up above 70 degrees, so you actually get that effectiveness. These all have different mechanisms, but most of these literally burn the cells in the plant using certain things by either dehydrating them, interrupting a mechanism in those cells to where they literally just die. So what these are doing are naturally causing the cells to rupture or stop in those plants, literally killing anything that it touches. Again, it typically doesn't go down into the root system, so reapplication is what's needed to really kind of beat these weeds down. There's another one, weed beater. I think I do have Moss Max up here, which is something I didn't mention on the slide, but that's a very similar product. It's just an organic. I believe it's a fatty acid. Yeah, potassium salts of a fatty acid. The slide that I have, the pictures I put up there are just Weed Beater FE, which we normally do carry. We don't have any right now. But the Weed Beater FE is it is a selective herbicide, so that you should actually be able to use in your grass. And that's really the only one that should be selective in lawn. So you can use the Weed Beater FE in the lawn that uses iron to burn the cells. There's another one that I found just kind of Googling organic vinegar mixes. There's all sorts of vinegar mixes. There's all sorts of fatty acid mixes, caprylic acid. So they should all be relatively effective. The biggest thing is making sure you mix it appropriately. So whatever product you use, read that label. Make sure we're obeying that mixture, because if we undermix or overmix, our results are going to be way off. So yeah, just the biggest thing to know with those, do-it-yourself recipes. There's vinegars and stuff like that. Some of the store-bought ones, the over-the-counter recipes, are a little bit of a cleaner, more commercial-grade chemical, so they can be more effective. But yeah, they burn plant cells. Again, the downside is going to be frequent reapplication. Hot surfaces, hard surfaces are probably going to be easier to get more effective use out of this. But yeah, again, in combination with other things, these sprays can be really effective. Okay, another kind of big blurb slide. This is kind of a big one about defining weeds. It confuses people when we say this, but what is a weed? It's a plant out of place. Here's a close-up picture of a dandelion in a lawn. if we get really close, you might like the look of the dandelion. In fact, I've had customers who say, I love the violets in my lawn. I'm like, well, then don't mess with them. If this is something that most people call a weed, but you actually enjoy, then it's not a weed in your garden. So dandelions actually were imported for salads from Europe initially. So that's why we have dandelion. So this is a plant that was seen as a food crop. And now it's made its way as to seeing like the bane of our lawns. So just to know, we don't need to kill everything in our garden. You might find something that is volunteered, like milkweed, for instance, can grow naturally. You could leave it there, and now you can have a butterfly garden just because we didn't spray something we thought was a weed. So just a big one for me, making sure we know what we're spraying and know that we don't want it before we spray it. Okay, so I believe this is my last slide. Yeah, so we're just going to talk about solarizing. We've kind of gone through the basics. We showed a little slide earlier of our solarizing project. I'm just going to go through these little blurbs real quick, and then we'll take a look at a kind of a little time lapse on how we got here. I like seeing that creeping Jenny in that picture. That's pretty crazy, all that yellow creeping Jenny. But yeah, so we've got this trial area, and we're going to start with one of our first steps, suppressing those weeds so that we can start planting in the future. We have 3 different colors of plastic, and the idea behind this is we're just going to see what happens. We all kind of have an idea of what's going to be best, but let's just put them out there, use the heat. Hopefully we have, maybe not for y'all, but for our plastic, hopefully we've got some more heat coming in the future so we can really test it out. We'll check on it over the next few months and see how it's going. But we're going to use white plastic. This white plastic is typically not something used. We're going to use it kind of as our control. So it might smother the sunlight, but it is not going to heat the soil. So we'll see how much damage blocking the sunlight does without heating the soil. My gut is telling me that's going to be the least effective, but we'll see. We're also putting down clear plastic. This is something that I've used personally more than any of the other ones. So the clear plastic, like we saw with the tractor in the California agriculture, the idea is that it's letting light pass through, but not the heat out. So you get light transmission, and then it traps the heat inside of that clear plastic. The drawback is we're getting sunlight, and some weeds may be able to push through that heat and grow with the sunlight. So the reason I think that this will work is kind of like the hot car without tint on the windows. If you have a clear window and it's letting that light in, it's going to trap that heat. If we have something dark on the window, it may reflect that heat away and keep it cool inside. But we'll see. So the third one is black plastic. This is really commonly used. It may be less effective. It may be more effective than the clear plastic. I think it depends on region. But the black plastic, it's going to absorb all of that sunlight and heat. It's also going to smother the weeds and not let sunlight through. So this might be a twofold kind of thing where we're hitting those weeds on both ends. I'll go ahead and tell you the black plastic on a hot day is easily hotter to the touch. I mean, we're talking noticeably hotter, pull your hand away. So we're going to put these 3 out. Maybe we'll roll that beautiful sped up footage here in a second, and I'll just kind of talk about what we're doing with y'all. But yeah, this is the scenario, and we're going to update y'all here in a month or two. Let's take a look at them videos. Okay, guys, here we go. Finally working for once. So yeah, this is our area. You can see the weeds are probably 3 foot tall. There's no way we're going to get plastic over this. So first step is to weed eat that stuff down so that we can actually get a mower on it. So we're just going to weed eat as low as we can in these areas, not trying to get accurate or anything. But yeah, weed eat that area down, and then the next step we did was to mow it. So hopefully you have a decent mower that can power through some weeds. But if you can drop your mower really low, you can see all that dirt we're cutting into. We're trying to get this solarizing plastic to lay as close on the ground as you possibly can. You can see me wearing my face mask there. I mean, it's dusty. You need to wear some protective equipment. even though we're not spraying any chemicals right now, you still do need to protect yourself. So the get-up I have on is really the same I would use if I was spraying any chemical. So rubber boots, some sort of glove. A rubber glove would be ideal. Pants, if you're spraying anything, especially if there's any sort of weather or breeze possible. Glasses and a hat if possible. But yeah, we just want to keep things out of our hands, away from our feet, and just really keep stuff off of our skin if we're spraying anything, because inevitably there is going to be a breeze and that's going to move. So just, anything that you would use to go out and do weed eating in your yard, wear that when we're spraying chemicals, no matter what it is, organic, synthetic. It's just always good to be safe, especially if we're working with concentrates. Those can be, concentrated and they can burn skin. So just be a little bit careful. Again, we have that plastic out there right now. It's doing its job. The greatest thing about the Solarizing is we don't need to mess with it. We're just going to leave it out there and check on it and see how it's going. We've kind of used some boards and blocks to pin it down on the ground to keep as much hot air from escaping as possible. So yeah, we'll check on that, and hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll have some bare, almost sterilized ground that we can work with later to do some fall planting. So we've got other areas in that garden we can do some stuff. Maybe we'll do some of these organic chemical sprays to see how effective they are. And yeah, we're going to go from there. I would imagine we'll probably start pulling this stuff up at the earliest beginning of October, because we should still get some hot weather. So yeah, stay tuned, y'all, and that's all I have for organic weed control, and we'll take some questions.
If you have any questions, just go ahead and type them in the chat. Same goes for Facebook. We'd love to answer anything while we have Ben here. Okay, one question coming in here. Best way for getting rid of poison ivy?
Poison ivy, and unfortunately that's one of those ones that has a glossy leaf. That's an identifying feature of poison ivy. It has that kind of glossy leaf on it, and that tells me that it has a cuticle on the leaf, which can make it difficult to control. You should be able, I would, if you want to go organic, I would start with a product like Burnout. It might work. The catch is you need to get that poison ivy down under 6 inches. So if it's already tall or a sizable plant, these organic controls are only going to be so effective. Ideally, you can get it cut back. Really, the best method, even though it sounds scary, is mechanical removal with poison ivy. I mean, I've seen some people really suit up to pull this stuff. Disposable rubber gloves and a leather glove, and then just basically, wash that leather glove when you're done and remove that rubber glove. Anything that you can throw away, like I said, rubber gloves or kitchen gloves, something that you can get off your hands once you get the oils on there. Just because really the organic chemicals are going to be marginal at controlling poison ivy because of that cuticle. If you're going to use a synthetic herbicide, there are things with something called an ester in them, and those literally burn that wax off the leaves. That would be the most effective if you want to spray a chemical. Other than that, it's suiting up and pulling that poison ivy manually, as tough as it can be.
I see, Ben, you've got a couple of tools there.
Yeah, and I didn't mention the weed barrier. We talked about cardboard and stuff. But yeah, I've got tools. We did talk about the stirrup hoe, but hori-horis have become real popular. Those are weed knives. Really anything you can sharpen, I think, is a good tool, because a lot of these weeds and tough soil we have, if you can have a sharp tool, it's going to make it a lot easier on you getting in, cutting the roots. But yeah, I do like pointed shovels, hori-horis, or soil knives. They have serrated edges if you need to do some heavy cutting. These are nice, and like I said, they can be sharp, so you can really get it up underneath some of these weeds. These narrow ones are good for plants with taproots, such as dandelion, because if you don't get that taproot, it's going to come back. And there's other tools, but these are probably the ones I use more for hand pulling weeds, getting down underneath the root system if I'm just doing it by hand. We do have this weed barrier. This is the weed barrier that we use. It is biodegradable. I'm actually not 100% sure what the material they use to make this is. It doesn't say it anywhere on there, but it will degrade. And if you have it exposed to the sun, it'll degrade in a few years. If you put it under mulch, it will degrade in probably 6-7 years. So if you forget about it, it will kind of return to our soil, and that's what we want to see. But these weed barriers can be good. I just watch out for them holding too much water or compressing soil. So using weed barriers around trees and shrubs can be a little tricky, but you can definitely use it in places like veggie gardens with a lot of success. But yeah, a weed barrier, it's basically a more a store-bought version of the cardboard method. And this can be used for other things too, but for weed control, it's a pretty good option, amongst some other things.
Someone chimed in about the poison ivy. They said, I pull it up with gloves and wash my hands within 30 minutes to get the oil off.
And, you know, poison ivy is all about getting those oils off your hand or letting them dry out. So, yeah, just be very litigious about your protective equipment when dealing with poison ivy.
Okay, well, I think that's everything. No further questions. Take it away, Ben.
All right. Yeah, thank you all. I'm glad y'all are interested in this topic. You know, here at Bates, we are trying to push more organic products. Like I said, especially as we find out more synthetic products can persist in our environment. You know, let us know what y'all are interested in. And if, you know, you, the customer, voices an opinion and you really want to see more of these organic products available, you know, we'll start carrying more and the producers will start making more options. So, again, you know, get your gloves and hands ready for a little bit of weed pulling, spirit plant fingers. And then, like I said, use some other products to help you out here and there. Just let us know if you have any questions, and we'd be glad to help y'all out. Thank you.